Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Monday afternoon. So you might have noticed the time change. So we switched to 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern because of different scheduling reasons, right? Trying to, of course, hoping to get some more viewers, more eyeballs right before TYT. That failed spectacularly. In fact, we had no more viewership than we had before, and in some cases even less, especially if I happen to go over 6 p.m. So that didn't quite work out. And then, of course, there was stuff, related to, of course, my private life, which led me to try to, maybe do the show a little bit later. Of course, that changed, and so now it's better to do it actually earlier in the day. And so I was thinking, okay, well, how far back can I get this? And so I decided to do a poll. So I did a poll in the community tab on YouTube, and over 500 of you guys and gals said, bring it back to 3 to 4. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. We liked it when you were doing it 3 to 4. And then, of course, some of you said, I don't care where you go, I'll follow you. Whenever. Bless your hearts. I love that. And then, of course, there's the people that's like, hey, I'd like to watch, but that's when I work. And so, unfortunately, that sucks. I wish I could do something about that, but late shows do not work out very well for me, just due to the scheduling and due to what's going on in my life. So I'm not able to do like late shows, being on the East Coast. And so, look, I'm in the Eastern time zone. I'm not in LA, which would actually allow me to do even earlier shows, or if I wanted to, later shows. Because again, we would be in LA time, which is a lot better, I guess, for doing these types of live streams. But I am where I am, and it is what it is, and so I got to kind of deal with what I got, and so. Back to 3 p.m. Apparently, and thanks to you guys for and look, the poll's still going. You can go and answer, but it's overwhelmingly 3 to 4 p.m. Almost 73%. I think my audience wants me to go back to 3 to 4. So here we are. We're going to be doing this from now on. So thank you. For letting me know what's going on. And hopefully we can see more of you come back to the live stream and see if we can get these numbers up to, 200 plus people on the live stream. I've had that before. Let's see if we can do even more. So it would be, it'd be great. Okay. Anyway, so before I get into our breakdown of what we're going to do today, what we're going to talk about, because it's a mix of fun stuff. Really good news, actually, primary Democratic politics, including Bernie Sanders' new student loan debt relief plan. So your guys are going to love that. So we'll talk about that. Before that, I just want to give some shout-outs to our Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank George Torres. Not Soros, but Toros. Jeffrey Williams. Vincent Muskie, Carrie Bender, Alicia Greer, and Russell Dixon. So thank you to those patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. You can sign up to support the show so that we can continue to do the show, hopefully without advertising. And that's what I would love to do, is to cut down on my need to do advertiser-friendly stories. In order to pay the bills. So that's what helps me do a little bit more editorial freedom. Patreon.com/TYTNation, Venmo, PayPal, all that, or become a channel member. So all that helps us out. Okay. Anyway, breakdown. So we got Bernie Sanders' plan to wipe out student debt. That's awesome. We're going to talk about that. We'll give you the details. Then we have Bernie Sanders' interview over Iran, which, by the way, we have actually now admitted to doing cyber attacks against Iran, so that's great. And I say great in a not good way. Then we have, of course, polls that might spell disaster for Donald Trump in some of the states that he had won. We have that lawyer, Sarah Fabian. Apparently, she's getting dragged on Twitter, or she was. I love that story. Because, of course, she is the lady who argued that, those migrant kids, they don't need beds or toothbrushes, soap. Duh, why are we going to give them that? And then, of course, we've got something going on in Oregon. Apparently, Republicans have fled Oregon. I'm going to give you that story. You're going to love it. Okay. Anyway, so let's kind of dive in here. We'll start out with, of course, Bernie Sanders. And guys, you got a lot of comments, got a lot of questions and stuff. So leave those questions, comments, or do it in the super chat, and I will address those during the breaks. Okay. Anyway. All right. Moving on. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders wants to completely wipe out your student loan debt. Now, on Monday, Senator Sanders, along with several congresspeople, revealed their plan to take on the $1.6 trillion in outstanding student loan debt that plagues an estimated 45 million Americans. Now, before this was revealed, Sanders spoke to the Washington Post, and he said, quote, "This is a truly revolutionary proposal in a generation hard hit by the Wall Street crash of 2008, which I remember. It forgives all student debt and ends the absurdity of sentencing an entire generation to a lifetime of debt for the crime of getting a college education." Now, I love the framing on that, because what we have right now with student loans being so absurdly high, the cost of college, is basically a debt sentence where you can pay for 10, 20 years, 30 years, and still not pay off. There are people right now that are seniors that still haven't paid off their student loans and are, paying with their Social Security. So that is a bit of a problem, right? And so Bernie Sanders, he says, well, you got a problem? I got a solution. Why don't we just cancel all your debt? That sounds amazing. All right. Now, Sanders introduced this proposal alongside Representative Ilhan Omar and Pramila Jayapal, who's been helping work on this. Now, they plan to unveil the Student Debt Cancellation Act and the College for All Act in the House. Now, Omar, who tweeted this on Sunday, said, "I'm one of the 45 million people with student loan debt, 45 million who are held back from pursuing their dreams because of the student debt crisis. That's why I'm proud to stand with Senator Sanders and Representative Jayapal to pass College for All and cancel student debt." Now, that College for All, of course, would make colleges, public colleges and universities tuition free, so that people will not have debt going forward. Well, that's an amazing plan. It's two great plans put into one that will basically revolutionize higher education. Now, some might take, of course, umbrage with Omar, as pretty much everybody does, or somebody's going to take, going to get mad at Ilhan Omar. So let me just say, she was one of the successful ones because she now has a job in Congress. Now, that doesn't make her debt go away, but she's at a better circumstance to be able to pay off that debt. She still has it, right? She's fortunate, and she realizes that, hey, man, look, I make $176,000 a year. I can afford to pay off my student loans, but there's so many people who can't. And so I want to help those people. I want to make sure they can live their dreams and live their life and not, and not basically be stuck under this debt sentence for the rest of their lives. So that's great. I love it when people, basically are trying to help other people and using their power in the government to be able to do so, instead of course, helping rich people. Now, the other plan that I've talked about before on the show is Elizabeth Warren's, right? Now, Elizabeth Warren, basically, her plan, which I call pretty bold and progressive too, but it's not as bold and progressive as Bernie Sanders. In fact, There are severe limitations to that plan, as I've explained in the video. To give a short synopsis of why it's not as progressive, it only forgives, for example, up to $50,000 of student loan debt and uses various means testing to be able to do that. So that, I guess the argument is, well, I don't want to forgive the debt of rich people, which, look, I don't care who it is. Nobody should have to pay student loan debt. And again, this is public colleges and universities. But again, it would wipe out all of the debt, no matter who you are. All of the debt gone. I'm fine with that. In fact, I don't care. Let's get rid of all of it, because all of this debt is basically holding back the U.S. economy, right? Now, Vox took a look at it. This is Tara Golshin, and she called Sanders' legislative package, quote, the most ambitious higher education plan in the Democratic 2020 presidential primary so far. Let's be honest, I don't think you're going to get more progressive than that. Than literally saying, we're going to make all public colleges and universities tuition free, and on top of that, we're going to wipe out everybody's student debt. Gone. We're going to cancel it. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't think you can get more progressive than that, though I, of course, welcome everyone else to try. But that's why Bernie Sanders is, again, that's why I'm in favor of Bernie Sanders, because he will not be outdone. Now, she also wrote that unlike means-tested programs introduced by other 2020 candidates, Sanders' legislation would cancel student debt for everyone regardless of income or assets. Again, I'm not really bothered by that. I know some are like, well, I don't want to pay for some rich person to pay off their debt. You really think rich people have student loan debt? That people who are very well off have that debt? No, they don't. No, they pay out of cash and do legacy admissions at private colleges. Again, this covers public universities and public colleges, but also wipes out everybody's debt, no matter what kind of college you went to. But again, the people who are going to be affected by this are not going to be super wealthy people, because they don't have the debt. They don't have the debt. They're not taking out student loans. So you try to make that argument, you're not going to sound very smart. No. She also adds that while this is a universal program, students from any financial background would benefit from the elimination of tuition. The proposal specifically targets low-income students by increasing the federal Pell Grant program, tripling funding for the work-study program, and creating dollar-for-dollar federal match to states to eliminate additional costs related to going to college. So now, of course, here comes a question that's going to be asked ad nauseum by mainstream press. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? I mean, look, all this money, the money doesn't grow on trees, So we're going to have to figure out some way to pay. How are you going to pay for it, Bernie? How are you going to pay for it? Relax. He's already answered that question. By the way, you know what question they actually don't ever answer? How are you going to pay for endless war? How are you going to pay for tax cuts for the rich? Now, they never tell you how they're going to pay for that. But when it comes to, eliminating student loan debt, as well as, free public colleges and universities, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that? It's constant. Now, let me show you. According to the Post, Sanders would pay for his plan with a new tax on financial transactions that includes a 0.5% tax on stock transactions and a 0.1% tax on bonds. So this isn't going to the American people and saying we're going to raise your taxes. No, this is going to the banks and saying for every time you do, for example, an automated trade, because that's how this works on Wall Street, right? So these brokers, these stockbrokers, they just use automated programs to sit there and trade. They don't really do anything, right? And so these automated programs, every time that there's a trade, and there are multiple trades per second that happen, you get a 0.5% tax in the value of that trade. Okay, that sounds great. 0.1% tax on bonds. Those are government bonds, government issued. And how much money would that raise? The Sanders campaign claims that the news tax would raise about $2 trillion over the next 10 years. Not bad. Now, the Century Foundation, is a think tank, says such a levy would curb both Wall Street speculation while reducing income inequality. Now, there are more details, of course. Sanders' bill also includes $1.3 billion a year for low-income students at historically black colleges and universities. Just for the people who say, free college for all is racist. Again, super ridiculous argument. It's pretty much the same argument as them saying or claiming that healthcare for all is racist. No, our current system is actually racist. And a lot of Sanders' policy positions would actually go to ease that and actually help black families. Now, the Post also reported that there will be about $48 billion per year allocated towards eliminating tuition and fees at public schools and universities. Now, again, this is great, and this is what we expect from Bernie Sanders. Now, of course, again, there's going to be a lot of hate, too. Third Way is already attacking it, of course. I forget just how ridiculous there was a tweet from somebody who works at Third Way just trashing this plan. And so, look, you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of the pundits say we can't afford to do it. We can afford this. It's too much money. How's Bernie Sanders going to pay for it? That's the usual stuff. And then, as I alluded to earlier, you're going to see eliminating tuition is racist and sexist somehow. But in reality, of course, none of those arguments hold any sort of water because they're not made in good faith, right? For one, they're not made in good faith, and for two, they're not accurate. And so what we have is a policy that is actually geared at helping the majority of the American people. And of course, there's an other argument here that some out there, will get angry. That others, they paid their student loans. I paid my student loans. Why can't you? Why don't you pay your student loans? Like, why should we have to subsidize you? Well, for one, the tax money isn't actually coming from you. It's a tax on Wall Street, 0.5% tax on stock transactions, and a 0.1% tax on bonds. That's what would pay for it. So it's not actually coming out of your pocket. And for two, it's a horrible reason to, or a horrible thing to say that because I had to suffer and pay my student loans, which have been a racket. And we have to understand the framing of this, right? This issue, student loans themselves are a robbery on the American people, especially on the millennial generation, but, also on the younger generations and also members of the older generations who've also had to deal with this. It is a robbery. It was never meant to be this expensive to go to school. It just wasn't. In fact, since the 80s, the cost of college has increased by 1,100%. And that's because, of course, a lot of the states and the federal government decided that they were going to invest in education a lot less. Why would they do that? Of course, in order to give tax cuts for rich people and corporations. So the whole argument of, well, I paid my student loans, you should pay them too, it's basically it's not a good argument, right? I mean, the world doesn't revolve around those people, right? And the reality is that student loan debt has created a lost generation. There are millions of Americans right now that cannot be part of the economy because they have this crippling debt around their necks. They can't get houses because of the debt to income ratio because the student loans is way too high, right? There's people that can't buy cars. There's people that can't just be a part of the economy. Do you understand how much of the economy would improve if we eliminated that $1.6 trillion of student loan debt? And by the way, that is less than the estimated cost of the Trump tax cuts for the wealthy. That is much less, to put it into perspective, than we spent on Iraq and Afghanistan. We spent trillions of dollars on war. Why can't we spend trillions of dollars or $1.6 trillion helping the American people? I mean, look, right now wages are stagnant. Healthcare is unaffordable. A lot of the wealth has been put to the top. People are getting crushed in their student loan debt. We've got to do something. And this would be a start. Bernie Sanders' plan, not only for Medicare for all, but for free college and eliminating student loan debt, would be a boon to the economy. And that's why, of course, again, I'm with Bernie Sanders, and that's why I think that these bills are just absolutely amazing, and that's why we needed Bernie Sanders in the race. Keep putting forward this amazing legislation. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Okay. All right. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders got a little bit sarcastic on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday. Now, this exchange happened when Margaret Brennan, who was the host, asked him about Donald Trump's near attack on the country of Iran. Let's take a look.
Was President Trump's decision this week to call off that strike the right one?
See, it's like somebody setting a fire to a basket full of paper and then putting it out. He helped create the crisis, and then he stopped the attacks. The idea that we're looking at a president of the United States who, number one, thinks that a war with Iran is something that might be good for this country.
He was just doing a limited strike.
Oh, just a limited strike. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I just didn't know that it's okay to simply attack another country with bombs, just a limited strike. That's an act of warfare.
Sarcastic Bernie is the best Bernie. I love it. Oh, I'm sorry. Limited strike. Now, understand, he's not going after Margaret Brennan. No, he's going after the ridiculous idea of a limited strike. I mean, what's a limited strike anyway? You expect to bomb another country, but limited, right? A limited bombing of some of their infrastructure. And you expect them, what, to not strike back? Well, what happens if they do strike back? Your limited strike just becomes a lot less limited. Because if they strike back, well, then you have to retaliate. And it continues to escalate until you have a full-blown war. This idea of, oh, no, we're just going to do a limited strike here and there is ridiculous, absurd. But there is, of course, more from Senator Sanders. And a lot of it is, of course, him going after Donald Trump and then getting asked what he plans to do if he becomes president. Take a look.
When you said it was President Trump's fault that this situation evolved, don't you hold Iran responsible?
Yes, I do too. But what Trump has said, he said during his campaign, Trump has been extraordinarily antagonistic with Iran. Whether or not he wants to bring down their government, I don't know. I think people like John Bolton may very well want to do that. Trump is the person, you remember, who withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. So he has been, without any, I don't think anyone disagrees, extraordinarily provocative toward Iran and loving the dictatorship in Saudi Arabia. That's not the role that we should be playing.
How would President Sanders resolve this?
I'll tell you how we would. Look, this is a tough issue, and I'm not saying anyone can easily resolve it, but this is what I would say. I would say to Iran, I would say to Saudi Arabia, I would say to Israel, I would say to the other countries in that region, you know what? You have been at war in one way or another for decade after decade after decade. And by the way, your wars have not only impacted your own people, they have impacted the United States to the tune of trillions of dollars and 5,000 lost lives. We will play a role in bringing you together. And if you need economic aid, we will provide the economic aid. We will provide the resources. But we're not simply going to give more and more weaponry to Saudi Arabia, to Israel. We're going to try to bring people together for what I admit, Margaret, I admit it, will not be easy. But that's what the role of, I think, the U.S. should be, not simply to be part of the Saudi war efforts in the region.
I love that old man. All right, so look, Senator Sanders, He's come a long way in his foreign policy. I admit before it was not great, especially during 2016. But now he is very, very clear. Look, I want peace. I want to bring people together in the Middle East, right? So that we don't have people attacking each other, so that we don't end up having a war. Now, earlier, in a part of the video that was not, that I did not show, he was asked, okay, well, here's the thing. So what if, like, you're saying that you can't use military action at all, the president can? And Sanders says, look, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there are certain emergency situations where we can use presidential power for conflict. For example, if we were directly attacked, then we would need to respond. Other than that, no, it's up to Congress. And we shouldn't be having the president have all this power to go to war, which I believe is the correct answer. Yes, the president should be able to respond immediately from being attacked. But as far as anything else, declaring war, you've got to leave that to Congress because that is constitutional. Unfortunately, during the Obama administration and during the Bush administration, and really the Bush administration is sort of the cause to this, we have seen the massive expansion of presidential power as it comes to war. I mean, the president right now is able to use drones to execute American citizens overseas. And that's an insane power that I'm pretty sure the founders, if they had even ever heard of what a drone is, and by the way, I'm not even convinced that Donald Trump knows what a drone actually is. Oh, it's not a manned drone. Yeah, okay. But it's a power that they never gave the president that much unilateral power to declare war. Why? Because there would be people that would, of course, abuse that power and to get us into tons of ridiculous wars. That is not the correct way to go. Now, so Sanders, of course, is right. Now, as far as, of course, our goal, yes, we should get these countries to start actually trying to get along or talk or whatever. And, of course, it's going to be difficult, right? But, yes, we should at least try to be a positive force in the Middle East instead of right now what we're being is a negative force. The force that just comes in, bombs the crap out of everything, and then when everything else goes to hell around the place that we just bombed, we say, well, I never could have seen that one coming. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, who would have thought? I never, well, you know what? I guess we're just going to have to keep bombing then. And we're just going to bomb everything until, I don't know, everything's dead. And then no more Iraq and Al-Qaeda, or no more Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra or whatever. Yay. No, that's not the correct thing that we should be doing. That is actually counterintuitive because you're creating more terrorists when you just do more bombing campaigns. So now to those, of course, who kind of scoff at the idea, like, oh, come on, like, I get it. I get you want to talk to people. They won't talk to each other. And, we can't really help them. We can't really mediate them. And we can't, we can't do any of that, right? Well, remember, the United States after World War II, we took our top enemies, Japan and Germany, right? And we turned them into our top allies. You know how we helped rebuild those countries? That's how. The Marshall Plan was something that was never attempted before in the history of the world. And guess what? It was a resounding success. Germany is actually one of the most socially democratic countries in the world. Staunch U.S. ally. Strong economy. And look, maybe someday we could count Iran and Iraq as top democratic allies instead of places like Saudi Arabia, which are not democratic, which are authoritarian, which are religiously fundamentalist, and, brutal to their own people, right? Maybe we can see some of these countries and help them and become, help them become our allies instead of just places where right now we consider them to just have a bunch of brown people sitting on top of our oil. But in order to do that, we actually have to change our framing and to change how we see the Middle East. And I think, unfortunately, as long as energy companies continue to write our policies, we will not have that type of change. But we could start with the Bernie Sanders presidency. Okay. That said, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We have Trump supporters that might be turning on Trump. Interesting stuff. At least when it comes to some of these stats and some of these polls. Then we have that Trump lawyer getting destroyed on Twitter. And then what's going on in Oregon? Interesting stuff. So we'll get back to that right after this break. Please smash the like button and share with everybody you know on all social media. And we'll be right back right after this break. Around the Nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Some great comments from you guys. So let me read them from the members first. We have the Jinxana talking about student loans. Said student loans almost made me homeless with a newborn. I know that others have suffered worse. No, it's true. And why do we continue to punish people for trying to get an education? Doesn't make sense. Actus Magus says Republicans continue to treat Reagan like he was some kind of god, despite the fact that the roots of a lot of the country's problems began during his administration. I would say, yep, I agree with that. The thing about Reagan is that he perfectly embodied republicanism. Didn't really know a whole lot, wasn't a smart person. Oh, how dare you go after Reagan like that. No, he was an actor. And so he was just used to saying the lines that people would give him. And so the Republican Party said, yes. The business class said, yes, this is a guy that we want. Someone that's smart enough to operate a pen. I would say that Reagan is just a little bit smarter than Donald Trump, but just as racist and just as bad of a businessman. And let's see. So those are the member comments here. Some non-member comments. Jeff James, who is our resident German, I believe, asks, how is this even possible? Paid about $300. Oh, I'm guessing that's dollars per semester, including a public transportation ticket. It's possible because we live in a messed up country that does not value education. Sunglasses Girl says, fees were approximately half of what I paid to university in the form of tuition and fees. Florida has a 100% tuition scholarship. I had to use other financial aid for the fees. So it's just another way that they try to get more money out of you, of course. And finally, Takayaki says, the reason for the low viewership for the later time is because other channels like yours would do their live show at the same time before the Young Turks. I guess that does actually make a lot of sense, too. And it's hard being on the East Coast, you know? All right. Anyway. Maybe if I was like West Coast, maybe if I lived in LA, things would be different. But then again, I can't afford to live in LA, and I'm pretty sure most people can't. I barely live out here, right? Definitely can't live in LA. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Just saying. Okay. Before I get into it, again, hit the like button. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to hit the bell twice. Okay. Anyway. Let's go to Trump supporters. Okay. Now, President Trump's economy continues to sputter as unemployment has started to rise in key states following some planned layoffs from very large companies that we've been hearing about all year. Now, these companies benefited from Trump's gigantic tax cuts for the wealthy. Now, Trump, of course, is basically running on how supposedly strong this economy actually is. But as I've laid out in previous video segments, we're basically on a sugar high, right? And so that sugar high is, of course, starting to fade out. And the economy continues to sit on what I like to call a house of cards. And that house of cards is starting to fall apart. Now, according to new employment numbers that came out last week, over the last year, unemployment rates have increased in many of the areas that Donald Trump did very well in when it came to 2016. Now, these states included Mississippi, Arizona, North Carolina, Indiana, South Carolina, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. Now, this is according to numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, these states, as I said, went for Donald Trump in 2016, and to be fair, a lot of them still probably will. But interestingly enough, his approval ratings in these states are really, really bad. In fact, more people in Arizona and North Carolina disapprove of President Trump's job performance than approve, according to a recent Morning Consult poll. Not only that, but Trump, of course, narrowly won those two states, won by a margin of 3.6% in North Carolina and 3.5% in Arizona. Now, it does get better for Donald Trump in some of these other states, but not by all that much. In Indiana, Nebraska, and Kansas, Trump's net approval ratings are in the low single digits. That's a disaster. Super disastrous. Those states, of course, have a combined 22 electoral votes. Now, in some of the other states, he actually does a lot better. For one, he actually won by very large margins, 19% in Indiana, 25% in Nebraska, and 20.5% in Kansas. Now, this is not a predictor that Donald Trump is going to lose these states. Again, you can see he won by wide margins. And then again, he was running against a super unpopular person, Hillary Clinton. But okay. Now, depending on who runs on the Democratic ticket, those margins could end up being much closer, and maybe in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania could lead to Trump losing those states. And again, those 3 states voted for Barack Obama in 2012, but switched over to Donald Trump in 2016. And those 3 states together allowed Trump to win the Electoral College. And just as a note, you're going to want to watch these states. They have seen an increase in unemployment. So, look, this is the Rust Belt. Jobs are a big factor in these states, especially manufacturing jobs. Well, we just saw a bunch of layoffs from some of the big car manufacturers. GM, especially massive layoffs, despite getting the massive amount of tax cuts. Well, that's not going to play well here. So they're not doing better than before. It turns out that right now we're not winning with Donald Trump. And all of us pretty much know why, or at least we should, because Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, they got together, the rest of the Republicans, and they gave everything to the rich. They gave the money, of course, these corporations, gave money to their shareholders, and also pumped up their own stock values. According to executives, none of that money was supposed to go for raising wages. No, why? What? Wait, now Republicans tell us that, no, if you give the rich corporations more money in the form of tax cuts, they're going to use that money to raise wages and boost productivity and reinvest in their company, right? That's not what they did. And the shareholders, basically what happens is, according to some executives that I believe they spoke to CNBC, basically said the shareholders don't want this to go to wages. They want it to go back to them. Because if we give money for wages, that's less money we get. So, no, we're incentivized. The company structure itself is incentivized not to give wages, not to increase wages. And so, look, the only times that we did see a raising of wages, for example, when it came to Walmart, or not Walmart, when it came to Amazon, it's because of public pressure. Pressure from Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, pressure from Bernie Sanders, pressure from progressives. That's the only thing that actually changes wages right now. Giving them more and more tax breaks does not. Look, trickle-down economics. It only serves the executives. Never trickles down. Their glass just ends up getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, this year, we had over $1 trillion in stock buybacks. Now, that inflates the markets and creates a bubble. Now, what happens when you have a bubble? Bubbles burst. Not only that, but rich people, they've kind of run out of things to buy, which is disastrous considering our economy runs on consumption. So if all the wealth is sitting at the top, then what is everybody doing? How can everybody continue to keep up this economy when they don't have any money themselves? We need people to buy things so that the people who make the things still have a job so that they can also buy things. Now, if you go into the macro scale and look at it, it's kind of a ridiculous model because here you have infinite growth, right? Infinite growth is not a sustainable model, environmentally or otherwise. And we do need to have a plan to change that model. But right now, what we're doing is not working for that model or for any other model. And we need to change to a better system, a system of fairness. Now, right now, we'll never do that under Trump, Republicans, or corporate Democrats. But we need people in there, in office, in Congress, in the presidency, who are willing to change this system and go towards a system that is actually fair, just, and equitable. Okay. Next story. Let's do this. Now, there's been an argument about some of the treatment of migrants in these so-called detention centers. Now, progressives have been saying that they are basically concentration camps, while conservatives say, oh, no, they're not. There's no way there could be concentration camps. How dare you say that? Well, to underscore how progressives and AOC are actually correct, last week the Department of Justice had sent a lawyer, Sarah Fabian, to argue to the Ninth District Court that children in Department of Justice custody should not have access to basic things. Now, I showed you some of the video in a previous segment last week, but I want to show you some of that again to show you what she's actually arguing for and the judge's response to it. Let's take a look.
But are you arguing seriously that you do not read the agreement as requiring you to do something other than what I've just described? Cold all night long, lights on all night long, sleep on the concrete, and you get an aluminum foil blanket? Are you saying that that's
and
okay
took
under
credit
the
to lie
agreement?
down, which they also said.
I find that inconceivable that the government would say that that is safe and sanitary.
I think what I'm arguing, Your Honor, is that I don't believe that the district court made the finding in the way that Your Honor just detailed it.
Everything I just said comes right out of the district court order.
I think our concern is that the district court really looked at a condition, and again, as I said, I think sleep is clearly at the sort of one end of her findings. I think we also look at...
Which is your strongest argument, then?
Well, I mean, I think what I would go to is when you start enumerating, for example, specific hygiene items, and the way that was done is that the court sort of enumerated these and say these fall under the rubric, these fall in the category of what could be required.
Again, it wasn't perfume soap, it was soap. It wasn't, high-class milled soap, it was soap. And that sounds to that's part of safe and sanitary.
So that was one of the judges, and you could see that she was arguing that they shouldn't even have to be on the record to provide soap. I mean, soap, toothbrushes, or beds. Does that sound safe and sanitary? No, it does not. And again, these are children. We're dealing with children here. Most often, asylum seekers most often these children are asylum seekers that are fleeing violence and death, right? Now, these kids end up making the journey, usually, which is usually long and dangerous. They get to the border. We arrest them for allegedly their own safety, which is hilarious. And yet the government now wants to refuse to be able to refuse to allow them to have basic sanitary items like soap. And then, furthermore, they get mad when we say that they're concentration camps. Well, what else do you want to call them? They are concentration camps. Now, following this argument, as I said, where the Ninth Circuit judges, as you saw, push back on the idea that you can have safe and sanitary conditions with no beds, no toothbrushes, or soap, social media decided to push back, and they found Sarah Fabian. They found her name, and one of them, or some of them, defended her sort of as a way of like, hey, man, look, she's just doing her job. She's a lawyer for the Department of Justice, a lawyer for the Trump administration, and she's really sort of the face of it. But reality, Trump is the bigger evil, right? Now, let me give you an example of one of those. Is John Cryer. John Cryer says, Dear Sarah Fabian, I understand attorneys must sometimes advocate for things they don't agree with, but I can't imagine that you took your job with the hope that you'd be asking the courts to approve rules that actually hurt children. You don't have to do this. No, look, I get it. He's trying to appeal to whatever humanity she might have. The problem with that is that I don't think she has that humanity. Anybody who's okay with making that argument is probably not a good person in the first place. And to show you an example of that, Fabian had actually been in the news before on issues involving undocumented immigrants. Now, last year, apparently, she had delayed court proceedings on reuniting some migrant families or migrant children with their parents because she had something to do. And what'd she have to do? Well, she had to go home and dog sit. But you can just hire somebody? I might get flack for this because I know that some people, their pets are basically like their children. And I get it. But we're also dealing with human families that were ripped apart. You have kids that ripped from their parents that are waiting to be reunited. And you couldn't go get a kennel for your dog for just a couple of hours for the day? You can't ask your mom to dog sit? You can't pay somebody to watch him? You can't do that? Seriously. I don't mean to, make dog lovers upset. But seriously, this is a big problem. You rip these families apart, and now you're going to delay because, man, I just don't want to pay somebody to watch my dog. Seriously. Now, that's not the only one. She also argued for the Justice Department in 2015, during the Obama administration, by the way, that detention authorities should have the power to put immigrant children in solitary confinement. That's far worse than the dog one. Solitary confinement is considered torture. And she was like, what? Why don't we let the kids get put in solitary? I know. I bet she thought she had a good reason. This is why, of course, she ended up getting dragged on social media. Amy says, what type of person fights this battle against children? Shaman used Sarah Fabian. And, of course, again, her name went viral on social media over the weekend. Michael Scott Moore points out something important. He said, quote, even Somali pirates gave me toothpaste and soap. When the Somali pirates have more humanity than a member of the Trump administration. Man. Let me see. Elizabeth De La Vega says, everyone needs to see her and hear Sarah Fabian make this almost unimaginably unconscionable, inhuman, and inhumane argument before the Ninth Circuit. And I definitely suggest that you check out that video. Matthew Cortland, Esquire, says the banality of evil. Michelle Goldberg says, in some sense, everyone who defends this administration is Sarah Fabian. Nick Jack Pappas says, consider all the people who are defending Sarah Fabian because she's just doing her job, as if she doesn't have free will. When did we reach a point in this country that our jobs became more important than our morality? I think we've been at that for quite some time. Let's see. Sadly, this stuff isn't new. Says, oh, I'm sorry. Tempest says, doing your job was proven not to be a defense already. Trumpeltinskin says, paging Sarah Fabian, your room in hell is ready. Oh, damn. And there's, of course, a lot of other responses here. Wesley Chu, for example, says, I wish to one day have the audacity to do something as Sarah Fabian did when she argued that kids don't need soap, toothbrushes, or blankets in front of a judge who literally spent 3 years in a Japanese internment camp. That was one of the judges that was in the video as well. So that was something that she apparently missed. Sarah McLean says she's just doing her job, feels like some kind of garbage take, when her job is to argue that refugee babies don't deserve toothbrushes, soap, or beds. Drag Sarah Fabian and everyone else who stands up for this. Drag them right to The Hague. Ooh. Strong words, but a strong sentiment from people who actually give a crap about the migrant children that we have. And again, this was a man-made problem. We didn't have to arrest all of these children and throw them into concentration camps. We didn't have to do that. This was a decision made by the Trump administration and their zero-tolerance policy. And while this happened to a smaller extent under previous administrations, and yes, it did happen, what Trump did is he took an existing problem and he made it worse. 89% of all families who claim asylum end up going before the court, right? They don't flee. They don't try to get into the United States, and live out as undocumented immigrants. They actually return to court because they have a good claim of asylum. So this whole idea that, no, we must imprison them, put them in these camps until we figure out what to do with them. It's just, look, you're asking for more situations like this. You're asking for human rights abuses. You're asking for 24 children to die in custody, which is what's happened. And you're asking for more. When are we going to learn that this is not the right thing to do and end this ridiculous practice? And yes, you know what I think? We should let them all go. Let them go. Let them go. Obviously, end the tent cities. Stop putting them in cages. It's actually probably cheaper to keep them in hotels or motels or whatever, or allow them to stay with family. And to those who make the argument, well, they're just waiting for family. Remember that ICE has set up traps to where if a family member comes to adopt, take one of these kids into custody, and they're found to be undocumented, then they end up getting arrested and thrown into these camps as well. So we've got to end this this horrific humanitarian and man-made disaster. We need to do it now. All right. One more here. Let's go to the last story of the day. The heck is going on in Oregon? But there's a wild story coming out of Oregon. Now, apparently, nobody likes a sore loser, right? So what happened here, and why I say that, is because 11 of the chamber's Republican senators just recently walked out of a legislative session to avoid a vote on a climate bill. So they were in the minority. This is democratically controlled. There's a Democratic governor in Oregon, and they want to put in a massive, sweeping climate change bill. The Republicans that are in the minority said absolutely not, and they decided to basically leave. They literally left the state, or some have. And some are expected to be, or suspected to be hiding somewhere in Idaho. I'm not kidding. So now, they literally have state troopers hunting for these GOP senators who have run. And again, it's because of the climate bill, right? That climate bill is expected to pass, get signed into law, and actually, aside from California, be one of the strongest climate bills in the country. Now, this legislation, House Bill 2050, would dramatically reduce fossil fuel emissions by 2020. Dramatically. They don't have much time left. So they're going to drastically reduce carbon emissions, and they're going to do it like that. Super fast. So it's very bold, very progressive, right? However, since the Republicans do not have a way to stop it the Democratic way, they instead decided to all leave and left the Senate 2 people short of a required quorum before a vote could be held. So if they can't get quorum, they can't get a vote. And so, therefore, Republicans have just basically ground government to a halt in Oregon because they were going to lose. Look, if you're going to lose, you gum up the works. That's how democracy works, right? If you don't like the bill on the floor, just run. Just run away. Run away. No, that's not how it works. They're doing the legislative equivalent to flipping over a chessboard because they were losing. Hey, Republicans, don't you believe in democracy? You always say, democracy, democracy. Now, just imagine if left-wingers pulled this kind of stunt. What would they say? What would they say? Lock them up. Lock them up. Their heads would explode. Now, of course, I think a lot of people on the left would not have the stones to do it, let's be honest. In Michigan, for example, Republicans stomped all over democracy while Democrats were in the minority. Stomped all over it. Literally structured votes to leave out Democratic congressmen. Now, did the Democratic congressmen, while they were trying to push through things like right to work, did they leave the state? No, they stood there. They stood up while they were getting steamrolled. And maybe they should have left because, again, they were trying to usurp democracy. No, but see, the Republicans, the only democracy they like is the democracy where they win. Now, there's a little bit of a wrinkle to this story. which has some added, I guess, strangeness to it, but also a level of danger. Because now you have white supremacist militias that are promising to protect the right-wing senators from being forced to do their jobs. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Members of the Three Percenters militia, that is an anti-government extremist movement, they recently wrote on Facebook that they would do whatever it takes to keep the senators safe. Now, considering that these senators are being pursued by Oregon State troopers, would that involve shooting at cops? I don't know. Maybe it could. I hope not. I mean, I thought conservatives were pro-police. Didn't blue line and all that. Blue lives matter. Blue lives matter. Well, I guess not if it means doing your job or having to do your job. Now, and now there's this HuffPost here, right? It's reporting on this, and apparently a leader with another right-wing militia, the Central Oregon Constitutional Guard, had posted on Facebook that he spotted a Republican state senator eating bacon and eggs at a diner in Redmond on Saturday. And so he's like, wait a minute, what are you doing here? In fact, he said that this is Guard member B.J. Stoper. Quote, what the hell are you doing here? The Republican state senator, this is Dennis Linthicum of Klamath Falls, said, quote, having bacon and eggs just like you. As for the police, I'm not worried. Pretty sure the boys have me covered. Now, who are the boys? It's the militia. This guy's running from the cops, and he's like, oh, don't worry. This anti-government militia, they're going to protect me from the police. I mean, again, heads would explode if this were a left-winger. This would be a national manhunt. How dare these unpatriotic left-wingers shut down the government and to further the radical left agenda. I mean, come on, man. There's no comparison, right? But these Republicans, they refuse to do their jobs. And they are getting backed by anti-government militias. Anti-government militias are actually responsible for most of the domestic terrorism in the United States. And these Republicans are like, cool. Yeah, oh yeah, the boys, they'll protect me. But no, I haven't even got to the most egregious part of this. And it is all egregious, right? Now, they're now asking the Democrats for concessions for them to come back to work. So they throw a fit, they leave, they're getting pursued by state troopers. And by the way, they're also getting fined $500 for every session they miss. So now they're getting fined on top of that, right? And now they're asking, and this is a senator from Bend, Oregon, who was sitting by an undisclosed lake, told a reporter that the GOP lawmakers would return to the Capitol to consider a bipartisan and less complicated bill than what the Democratic majority backs. We'll come back if you give us something. If you give us what we want, then we'll come back. Oh, hell no, boy. No, we are not doing that. That is not going to happen. I mean, the unmitigated gall of the Republican senators to cut tail and run, to do everything that they've done, and then come back and say, if you just work with us, then we'll come back to work. No, we're going to haul your ass back to work in handcuffs if we have to. I mean, this is how Republicans work, though. They gum up the works, they make sure that you can't do your job, and then they turn around and demand compromise. Again, that would never happen if the Democrats did that. Absolutely never. You know what Republicans would do? They would scream treason and say, shoot them all. Now, to be fair, the Oregon Democrats are actually playing a little bit tough. And I want to show you this poster a little bit closer here. And this is what they posted. Fugitives from justice and their jobs. Even then, at the bottom it says, if you find them, don't harm them. Oregon needs them back to work. And this was accompanied by a tweet. It said this: Oregon State Republicans are hurting Oregonians across the state, including in their own districts, by refusing to show up for a vote. It's time for them to come back to Salem and do their jobs. And even then, the Republicans or the Democrats are still so nice and not nearly as vicious as the Republicans would be if the reverse were true. You know what I think? Lock them up. Lock them up. You're not going to do your job. Well, then why are you there? Get rid of them. Come election time, I guess you got to get rid of these guys for having just the stones to walk out and to do what they've done. Because that is not somebody that I would want representing me. Okay. Republicans, man. Holy crap. Holy crap. All right. See, as if, Trump is not the worst, although he is pretty bad. Here we have stuff like that happening across the country. All right. Anyway, thank you guys for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Clips will be up later, a couple of hours. So stay tuned for those. YouTube.com/TYTNation. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, please consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation, or helping us. Look, somebody did ask earlier the difference between becoming a channel member and joining Patreon. Is there a better cut on Patreon? Look, I think there's a better cut on YouTube, to be honest, but that's only $5.99 or $4.99. So with Patreon, what you get to do is you get to decide what you want to what you want to give per month, and actually the Patreon gets to me faster, so I don't have to go through YouTube. And when they decide to pay out, Patreon is actually pretty steady, so I actually prefer that. But either way helps us out, and so if you want to help with the show, that's how you can do it. All right, guys, thank you all. Love you, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Around the nation.